So the film has a great plot, but it also has great characterization. Nicholas really is a great main character, but also all of the supporting characters have depth, they have personality, deep backstories, arcs and relationships, and they all contribute to the story and the themes of the film, unlike the characters in A Troll in Central Park. Now, I know what you're thinking, how are these films related at all? You're gonna have to give me a second. Oh yeah. Well, I cut so many corners. I watched the film at Central Park for the sake of seeing a lot of new Hollywood movies while watching this. Now I know what else you're thinking. Did you really watch that film after seeing the Nostalgia Critics review? Just because it was directed by Don Bluth? Yes. Nicholas is a great character. He's just a wonderful main character. He's a very likable character while at the same time being very flawed. His backstory is detailed and deep. He grew up rich, so he's spoiled and greedy, but he did have a loving family, so has some compassion for people, and he's still caring for his family. But his father committed suicide. This made him sad and longing and caused him to become obsessed with security and success. Just like his father, and it made him bitter, but he's also closed off and static, not wanting surprises or contact with others, and is lonely, and this is also very subtle. He doesn't know why his father killed himself, so he just tries to shut himself off from everything as to not be hurt by anything, by any surprises. The same fear that Nemo's dad had in Finding Nemo, only he's also closed off from people, because he thinks that the world is cruel, so he is totally shut off from it, and he's success obsessed, because he seems to think his father killed himself because his financial life wasn't going well or he wasn't successful enough. So in other words, he seems to assume his father killed himself for the same reasons that Rose's fiancé did. Oh my god, that was actually a clever reference! Bringing it with the balloons, bringing the champagne! I've got a reason to live again! Nicholas, I have the answer to all of your problems. Just make one funny joke on the internet and you know you don't suck as much as the Irish I'm going back to the basement now. Right there, I ruined it. No, wait, I want this to be PG-13. No, on the other hand, I do want this to be a dramatic scene, so you can watch. Oh no, wait, it might hurt. I might not be good enough at killing myself. Okay, fair enough. I'm a coward. I don't want to go through with it. Let's just continue with the review. He's also cynical and insensitive, and also a coward, pragmatic, and by the book, yet also polite and an intellectual, and he does have a sense of humor and is warm and open to his brother. Smooth and calm. He's fancy, loves goods, restaurants, and tennis, which is also some very nice detail. And he had a detailed personality and a life as well as a backstory. He's also supportive of his brother and has dinner with him, and is warm yet evasive and a bit inactive, but he feels guilty because his brother used to be on drugs, and he hasn't been supportive enough of him, and has been distant. He decides to be playful for his brother and to go to CS, and he thereby has taken the first step to grow and change. And he's sad and a bit reflective, but stays superficial, determined and harsh and distant, and is also in denial over the pain of losing his father and cold towards his ex-wife. So when he goes to CS, he's official and cautious, not wanting to take part in the game unless he knows what it is, but finally gives in when he's told it would be intriguing, but he remains biased and the game starts off being stressful to him and bringing out his darker emotions. He is irritated and impatient and confused by the tests. He continues to be controlling and critical, but does become more curious, asking what the game is about. Though he gets a cryptic answer, he also becomes a bit more friendly. His irritating moments make him more curious and aware of life and appreciate it. This is a very double-layered character arc, where his positive and his negative sides both grow stronger, but it in the end allows him to become less apathetic and empty. And it gets more and more contrasting as the film goes on. He remains hardworking and authoritative, tightly leading his business. Hey, I would also like to tightly lead some... I'm so gonna take that chemical castration. Yeah. Nicholas finds a doll on the spot his father jumped and is upset and suspicious and defensive. When he checks the doll, he becomes obsessive and more controlling, and when he's stalked on the TV, he becomes even more aggressive. And he gets a key, and he becomes more cautious and cranky. He's demanding and unforgiving and wants to forcefully retire an old friend of his father. In other words, he wants to fire him. And wants full control over a quick deal, but the suitcase won't open and the key doesn't fit, and he finally gives up and becomes hysterical. Man, I still wish I had the Toy Story 3 clip, you know, it is time to be hysterical! You know, he then is judgmental, unforgiving, and sarcastic to a waitress, who spills on him, and when she's fired, he turns out to have to follow her, and she's angry, and he's forced to act more understanding and then helpful, supporting a sick man, and is overwhelmed when he has to go with the ambulance, and then when he's left alone at the hospital, he's angry, scared, and confused. He then becomes more helpful, talking with Christine of CRS, and more courageous, going into a lonely elevator alone. And when Christine turns out to not be wearing any underwear, he becomes even more courageous and flexible, even going up alone, and more comforting. And he's forced to be less possessive, leaving a suitcase behind, and becomes more emotional and free-minded, running from the CRS security and climbing up a balcony, and more caring, trying to protect Christine from falling. He's also somewhat saddened, losing an expensive shoe, and humbled, falling into the garbage. This causes him to be more generous, taking Christine to his apartment. And I would also like to take her to my... And he allows her to use the shower, and I would like to offer her... Damn it! And is more passionate, being sexually attracted, as am I, and screw chemical castration. I've got a blunt knife, I'm gonna use that. He even offers to help her get her job back. I have a... I wish I wasn't such a coward. So he grew while being angry, confused, scared, and sad. He then tries to pick his life back up and goes to the hotel where he left his card and finds in his room pornography, cigarettes, and drugs. And is embarrassed, neurotic, and secretive. And is then violent when he's being followed and becomes threatening and becomes more proactive. And he becomes more outspoken, accusing his old friend who he was gonna fire of framing him, because he believes he's responsible for all of this. But he's actually open and forgave him for firing him, and likes his retirement and is warm, causing Nicholas to feel more guilty and to be more apologetic. He tries to tell his attorney he isn't crazy and becomes more proactive, trying to find out about CRS, going to Christine. And then when they have vandalized his house, he's emotional and hurt, and he meets his brother, who tells him CRS was blackmailing him, making him very suspicious, and he becomes more stressed, and his brother then acts paranoid, angry, and hurt, accusing him of working with CRS, bringing up the fact that he's jealous and controlling and wanted his brother to be like him, and that he acted as a father figure to him, causing him to confront the fact he liked being a mentor to his brother, and wants too much to be like his father, and that he wants to control people, and that he felt burdened by the responsibility, and that he became closed off, and that he should simply cherish their brotherly bond. And I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to do this. Forgive me in advance. The ambiguously gay duo. Remember that? Yeah, I don't have the sound, so I... Okay, so it clearly ruined my balls. I need a lobotomy. Yeah, that's gonna solve all of these irritating jokes. Well, they did that on the Talt, remember, in Scubs, and yeah, I'm also too obsessed with that. You know, it's probably just that I'm totally perverted. By the way, do they still have lobotomies? Well, there's a Democrat in the White House, so of course! And then Nicholas is nearly drowned in the taxi and becomes tougher. He then is vengeful, defensive, and more cautious, asking investigations on CRS. But he also becomes more appreciative and spiritual and thankful, being nice to his personal assistant and asking about his father. And he confronts his fear of suicide and learns he just worked too hard and was lonely. And he's comforted his father doesn't haunt him, just as my father doesn't haunt me. And we will bring back South Vietnam. No, my father is not Rambo. Nicholas then is insolent and frustrated when they turn out to be spying on them, and when he gets upset and attacks the fire detector that they use to spy on him, they start shooting at him and they have to flee, and he becomes decisive, telling Christine to leave, yet he has her stay as to find out more about CS, and he's shocked to find out that all of his money was stolen and becomes insecure. So then he gets totally stressed and calls up his attorney, and when Christine turns out to have poisoned him and to work with them all along, he feels even more paranoid, and he's left for dead in Mexico. And then he's hopeless and acts humble to get it right. Is luxurious and gives up a watch from his father to get home. And he becomes less greedy and more slow, really taking the time to smell the roses. And he relaxes a bit after breaking into his house. And he first just tries to become calmer, and then he gets his secret gun. He becomes even more generous, giving larger tips, and loyal when he discovers his brother went crazy. And he then allows himself to be vulnerable, asking his wife for her car, and becomes more regretful, apologizing for the breakup. And he becomes warmer, but he becomes also even more vengeful when he sees that it was an act he spoke to CRS, and he becomes threatening, using his gun to get him to take him to CRS after being headstrong towards a mugger. And he's hysterical, kidnapping Christine when he's in the office, and very active, fleeing to the roof and wanting to speak to the manager. He then becomes stubborn, not listening when they tell him it is part of his game, and even lethal. And it seems that he shot his brother when they were trying to get through the door. He thinks he killed him. He thinks that it was all a game and that he misacted and therefore killed the person he loved about the most. So he jumps off, thinking he's got nothing to live for anymore, and actually has become suicidal just because he's so desperate and willingly jumps. But they have a safety net. So he was suicidal, but he was saved, and his brother is okay. So he now confronted his fear of death and was still okay, and turned out he did have reasons to live for, and that his brother's still fine. And he then finally cries and has his money back, and is warm to his brother, joyful and no longer greedy, splitting the bill and forgiving and apologizing to the man he fired. And he also becomes more romantic and deep, asking Christine out, and flexible, going on an unplanned date, although he is still a bit cautious, thinking this might still be part of a game. So his arc is fulfilling, detailed, and totally influenced by the story, and it is deep. That, like with Call in the Conversation, he fears that an evil from the past will repeat itself. He's closed off and greedy and an intellectual, but with him it is in his head, as he isn't corrupt or violent. He's open to change and allows people to help him. And he therefore becomes a lot happier again, and is capable of restoring his life. He's simply psychologically hurting himself, and he can choose to be happy. And also, it is creative that he had to become more desperate and stressed to become more emotional and appreciative and flexible. Like with Call, there are two building extremes, but as mentioned, here it has the opposite results. So it was inspired by a great film, but there is a very smart original twist to it. So his arc is smart, his character deep, and his backstory thorough. Nicholas is also extremely likable, although he's a flawed character, as I mentioned. One of the biggest concerns of all of the filmmakers was that he would either be too likable, not have enough of an arc, or not be worth caring about, but he actually is a very care-worthy person, because of course it's understandable he's cold and detached, as his father killed himself, and that's incredibly painful, and it went badly with his brother, but he is caring about his family, he is polite, he isn't really corrupt or abusive, he is also somewhat emotional, and he does really appreciate his personal assistant, can be regretful, can feel guilty, and can have a sense of responsibility, and he often thinks that he's doing the right thing. He's just more hurting himself than anyone else, although he is selfish and harsh, but he's not extremely mean, and he does have a sense of humor and is an intellectual. We get to detailedly know him, so he is actually very likable, especially as he even can be friendly towards his friends and can be a gentle person. So he is very likable, and it's very painful to see him hurting himself, and therefore really creates emotional stakes, and it's nice to see him change, and his arc is very effective, even though some people criticize that he wouldn't be likable, care-worthy enough. But I think they're wrong. So they're gonna have to die. And they're getting this. I'm an asshole, I know. And I'm not care-worthy. So why are you watching this? The answer is because it's the internet and you'll watch anything. It's actually not a big surprise. Why are we even bringing this up? Again, the answer is because I'm padding this. So, la 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 la. Okay, I'm done. And Conrad, Nicholas's brother's great also. He hates anti-smoking laws. Now that's just fantastic in and of itself. And wait, what? No, I'm not a smoker. I've got Tourette, which means that I hate being told what to do. Like the time that my father told me to grow up and become happily and successful. Yeah, I broke up with my hot girlfriend, started using drugs, and quit college. I won. I'm the one who's laughing last. I need therapy. He was clearly hurt by their father's loss as well, and he got to be on drugs, and his brother still loves him though, and he was a bit jealous and controlling of him, and he was actually changed by the game and became more open and happy and supportive. And it is a nice mystery how that happened, what kind of game he had. He's playful, happy, and loyal to his brother, although he's also rude, and he's relaxed and he's concerned, and he knows when to be serious, and he's open, and he's also people-loving, saying he liked Nicholas's ex-wife, and he's generous and helpful and forgiving, as he isn't actually angry at his brother anymore, and is just pretending to make him confront his inner emotional turmoil. And he can also be emotional and be secretive, playing that he's angry at Nicholas, and even acting as though he died, and as though he's totally crazy and paranoid. And he's a supporting character, yet has a very detailed backstory and personality, and is likable, as he cares for his brother, is funny and generous. He also has a very interesting relationship with his brother. He's open to him and cares for him, and they had a bond since childhood, and did have loving parents. But there is some sadness between the two, and Nicholas feels responsible for him as his little brother, and is guilty for not having been there more for him. And he's also playful, and his brother's serious, who due to the joking name immediately knew that it was his brother that was trying to make an appointment with him. He also really adds to the story, introducing Nicholas to the game, confronting him on his controlling behavior, telling him that they were robbing him and causing him to jump.